Welcome, traveler, to a gentle voyage across the stars. Tonight we drift into the heart of the Wookiee homeworld, Kashyyyk, where among the shadowed trees and moonlit roots, a legend rests in silence. His fur silvered by age, his roar softened by time. This is a tale of Chewbacca, warrior and friend, who once flew beside Han Solo and roared across the galaxy. In this peaceful story, you'll hear echoes of the past, of war and wonder, friendship and farewell, and you'll meet a young Wookiee who dares to listen and learn what it means to carry a legacy. The mists drifted low in the Shadowlands, down where the roots of Kashyyyk's mighty Rosha trees clawed into the darkness. The air was thick with memory. It smelled of moss and bark and the slow breath of the ancient world. Shafts of late blue. Sunlight, filtered through 1,000 branches above, painted the forest floor in soft golden pools. The calls of bird-like crows echoed far off, gentle, curious, and fading with distance. A young Wookiee moved quietly through the underbrush. His name was Ruka. Not yet full-grown, but taller than most humans, his cinnamon fur shimmered faintly with nervous sweat. He shouldn't have come this far. No one did. The elders warned of spirits and silence and the things that watched from between the vines. But something had called to him in his sleep. A sound, ancient, slow, melodic, woven like breath through the trees. He had followed it. There, beneath a half-buried root, arching like a ribcage from the earth, the ground sloped down into a shallow clearing, dim and quiet as twilight. And in the center, sitting on a stone smoothed by time, was a Wookiee like no other, massive, even slouched. His fur was gray at the shoulders and silver down the back, with streaks of copper like dying embers. His satchel lay untouched beside him. Across his knees rested a crossbow unlike any Ruka had seen, its metal dulled with age, its string silent. The old Wookiee said nothing, did not move. He simply gazed up into the canopy, where only a sliver of sky glowed lavender with dusk. Ruka stood frozen at the edge of the glade. He knew the stories. Everyone did. The life-debt warrior, the Falcon's guardian, the roar that shook the Empire, Chewbacca, living myth, ancient protector, mourner of Han Solo, friend of Jedi, bearer of grief and legend. And here he was, still, quiet, a statue under the stars. The air shimmered with tension, thick and expectant. Ruka's heart thumped like a wood drum in his chest, but he couldn't turn back. His breath came slow, careful. Then a sound stirred the hush. Not a roar, not speech. A low hum, deep and round like a river stone dropped into a pond. A vibration, felt more than heard. Chewbacca's throat rumbled, not with warning, but with melody, ancient, wordless, a Wookiee song, the song of the stars. Ruka had heard it once during Life Day, sung by elders around the fire. But this was older, slower. It wound through the trees like a memory, soft and pulsing. It made Ruka's knees tremble, not from fear, but from recognition, as if his bones had heard this tune before they ever learned words. Chewbacca kept humming, his eyes still pointed to the sliver of sky. Ruka stepped forward. A branch cracked underfoot. The song ceased. Chewbacca blinked slowly and turned. His eyes met Ruka's. They were not fierce, not glowing. They were old, kind, sad, and for a heartbeat surprised. He tilted his head. A quiet woof escaped his nose. Ruka bowed quickly, pressing both fists to his chest, a respectful sign among Wookiees. He dared not speak. Chewbacca studied him in silence, as though reading every scar and strand of fur. Then, slowly, the elder patted the moss beside him, a gentle invitation. Ruka padded over, heartbeat thudding, and sat. The moss was soft and damp. The air smelled of sap and thyme. Birds quieted, wind hushed. Even the insects, always buzzing, seemed to hold their breath. They sat together. Chewbacca breathed deeply, letting the silence stretch like roots through soil. Finally, in a voice that rumbled like distant thunder softened by rain, he spoke. "You heard the song?" Ruka nodded. Chewbacca's eyes softened. He turned back to the sky. Few still do. The old Wookiee closed his eyes, and for a moment Ruka saw the weight he carried. Centuries of battle, friendship, loss, and something deeper, something older than the rebellion, older even than the Jedi. "This place remembers," Chewbacca murmured. "So I come here, when I must remember too." Ruka swallowed. His voice cracked softly. "Remember what?" Chewbacca opened his eyes. They glistened. "The day I met the man who changed my life." A soft gust moved through the glade, rustling the leaves like quiet applause. Chewbacca shifted on the stone and adjusted the bowcaster across his lap. "The day I met Han." The clearing dimmed further as twilight crept through the forest canopy. Chewbacca looked not at Ruka now, but past him, into memory, into the deep places where laughter and pain meet. And as the last birdsong faded and the stars blinked awake above Kashyyyk, he began to tell the tale. "The day I met Han." The forest was still. Chewbacca's voice, low, rough as bark, softened by time, rose gently into the space between the trees, weaving memory into mist. "It was not a noble place where I met him. Not a forest like this. No stars above, no wind, only mud, thick, choking mud." He shifted on the stone seat, a slow creak of old joints following him. Ruka sat close, silent, eyes wide, his breath shallow. Chewbacca's words had the weight of drums, struck softly, resonating long after each syllable. "Mimban." The name rolled out like thunder. The young Wookiee flinched, recognizing it from war tales. A forgotten world, soaked in endless rain. A battlefield, with no sky, only smoke. Chewbacca stared into the distance, though his mind was far beneath that grey and broken world. "I had been captured, chained, beaten, my fur matted in blood and swamp, the Empire." His breath caught. "Used us, pits of prisoners, gladiator cages. We were numbers, not names, but they feared my strength, so they starved me. To make me slow." His claws curled slightly, the tremor of old rage flickering like a dying ember. "And then, one day they threw someone new into the pit." A pause, long and slow. He exhaled. He smelled terrible, like fire and oil and arrogance. And he talked, never stopped talking. Chewbacca made a low, amused sound, not a laugh, but something near it. The kind of sound you make when remembering a friend who always made things worse before they made them better. He tried to speak to me, in broken Shiriwook, called me a big fuzzball, tried to tell me he had a plan. Ruka tilted his head. "What did you do?" he whispered. "I threw him into the mud." The old Wookiee let out a soft grunt of amusement. "Twice." A breeze stirred the canopy above. Leaves rustled softly. Somewhere far off, a Kaishor beast called in its sleep. But then he looked at me, not with fear, not like the others. He looked like he knew me, Chewbacca leaned forward slightly, elbows on knees. He told me if I helped him escape, we could both be free. I had heard lies before, but there was something in his eyes. He wasn't afraid to die. He just didn't want to do it alone. A moment passed, so I lifted him from the mud, broke the chains, tore the door down. His voice dropped lower, softer, and we ran through fire, through stormtroopers, through chaos. I roared and he whooped. We didn't know each other's names, but we ran like we had always been meant to run together. Chewbacca closed his eyes. Later, he told me his name, Han Solo, and I told him mine. And he said, "You're with me now, oh buddy?" Just like that. He exhaled deeply, the breath rumbling through his massive chest. That was the day I met my brother, not by blood, not by species, but by choice. The glade was quiet. Ruka didn't speak. He didn't need to. The tale spoke louder than any words. Chewbacca reached slowly into the satchel beside him and pulled out something wrapped in old cloth. Unfolding it carefully, reverently, he revealed a rusted piece of chain. He held it in his massive paw, letting the light catch on the links. One of the last pieces from Mimban. I keep it to remember the day I was freed. He wrapped it again and placed it back inside. He gave me freedom, and I gave him my loyalty, my life, my strength. Chewbacca's gaze drifted to the stars above, peeking now through the thinning canopy. We flew the stars, laughed, fought, lost, and always came back for each other. He sighed, deeply, weary, but not sad. I've outlived so many, but that day, that first day, it lives in me like fire in the cold. The clearing was hushed again, as though the forest too was listening. Chewbacca looked to Ruka, his voice softened even further. Remember this, young one. Not all chains are metal, and not all bonds are seen. But when you meet the one who calls you by your truth, you never forget. The stars blinked gently above, and as the wind shifted and the night deepened, Chewbacca closed his eyes once more, letting the memory settle like dust on old stone. The forest breathed with him, and somewhere far above the trees, a distant falcon echoed in the silence of space. The day I met Han, the stars above Kashyyyk now shimmered in full. Tiny lights scattered across indigo sky, winking through the trees as if listening to the story below. The clearing was quiet, save for the rustle of canopy leaves far above and the steady breath of two Wookiees sitting side by side, one young and wide-eyed, the other weathered by memory. Chewbacca leaned back slightly, his fur rustling against the mossy stone. His eyes did not blink. They stared through the branches, through time, through shadowed hyperspace lanes lit by the glow of memory. The falcon was never beautiful. He rumbled softly, voice like gravel softened by rain. She was old, loud, always shaking. He paused and Ruka heard it again, that fondness, almost amusement, beneath the weight of his tone. But she was fast, so fast, and she was ours. A faint wind brushed through the trees. Ruka imagined the falcon, streaking through stars like a skipping stone across a black river, sparks of blue light trailing from her engines. I sat beside him in the cockpit. Every time, always co-pilot, never left his side. Chewbacca reached up and tapped his chest softly. The seat still remembers my weight. His hands moved slowly, as though miming the falcon's controls. His fingers knew the shapes, the distance between switches, the curve of the handles. Even now, we flew through storms, asteroid fields, gravity wells. I saw stars born and die, all from behind that scratched viewport. He gave a low growl, nostalgic but not sad. We smuggled spice, ran from bounty hunters, laughed with Lando, argued over broken hyperdrives, always moving, always running. Chewbacca tilted his head, fur catching the soft starlight. But sometimes, in the middle of it all, the galaxy would go still. Ruka blinked. Still? The elder nodded slowly. In deep space there is no wind, no birds, no rustle of leaves, just silence and light. He gestured upward with a large paw. Han would kill the engines, let the Falcon drift, just for a moment. And we would sit, not speaking, staring out into the void. He took a deep breath, as though remembering the feeling. Those were my favorite moments. The glade was silent, as though it too were drifting in the dark between stars. We never said it, never had to, but in those quiet stretches between missions, between battles, we knew we belonged to each other, no matter what the next storm brought. Chewbacca lowered his gaze to Ruka. His voice was slower now, almost a whisper. There is a peace out there that no war can touch. In those silences, I was free. Ruka nodded, not quite understanding but feeling the truth of it anyway. The way it settled in his bones like soft night rain. Chewbacca looked back to the stars. We did terrible things, and great things. We saved friends, lost others. We helped bring balance to a galaxy spinning on the edge. He paused. Something flickered in his eye, pride and sorrow entwined. But I remember the laughter the most. He let out a soft, rolling growl that faded into the quiet. Han singing old Corellian songs off key. R2 arguing with 3PO in static. Leia rolling, her eyes at both of them. Luke asking too many questions, and me grumbling at them all. He smiled barely, but it was real. The Falcon wasn't a ship. She was a family held together by stubbornness, duct tape, and love. He grew quiet then. So quiet, Ruka almost thought the story had ended. But Chewbacca wasn't done. There was one night, between missions, just after the Battle of Hoth. His voice dropped, distant and low. We had made it out alive, barely, lost friends, lost warmth. We were drifting again, just floating near the ring of Kafrene. The words were heavier now, like stones carefully placed on water. Leia had fallen asleep in the lounge. Luke was meditating. Han was piloting. I sat behind him, staring at the frost creeping along the inside of the viewport. Chewbacca looked down at his hands. He turned and said, "Chewie, do you think we'll ever stop running?" A pause. I didn't answer, because I didn't. No. The breeze returned, soft, steady. But for one night, we weren't running. We just sat there, in peace, between the storms. Chewbacca's eyes closed for a moment. Sometimes the smallest stars, the quiet ones, are the ones that guide you home. Ruka said nothing, couldn't speak. The story had settled in the air around him like fog, quiet, comforting, endless. And as Chewbacca leaned back once more, his body heavy with peace, the clearing seemed to shimmer with invisible stars, memories of laughter frozen mid-roar, echoing through leaves that would remember them long after they were gone. The day the Falcon was silent. The forest held its breath, Even the night creatures seemed to hush as Chewbacca stirred. His great frame moved slowly now, as though the very act of remembering had become a weight too sacred to lift quickly. The fireflies that had begun to glow among the moss paused in their dance. Ruka sensed it before the elder even spoke. This memory would be different. Chewbacca's voice, when it came, was low as roots beneath the soil, as soft as the wind when it carries grief. There are days when the galaxy breaks. He looked down at his paws, opened them, then closed them gently. The day the Falcon went quiet was one of those. He paused for a long moment. We had come to Starkiller Base, to rescue Rey, to stop the weapon. Han, he volunteered to go inside. His voice faltered, not from weakness, but reverence. He said it like it was simple. "I'll find a way in," he told Leia. "I'll bring our son back." Chewbacca's eyes closed tightly. His jaw clenched once, then loosened. I wanted to go with him, of course I did, but he told me to wait by the charge we'd set to collapse the oscillator. The moss below Ruka's seat seemed to pulse, alive with tension. A single nightbird called, then went silent again. I waited. Chewbacca's voice was nearly a whisper now. And then I heard the shot. The silence that followed was heavier than any roar. Ruka swallowed hard. Chewbacca did not cry, but there was something in the way his body bowed slightly, as though an invisible blow had struck him again, just like it had then. I saw him fall across the catwalk, into the chasm, his son holding the weapon. He looked up slowly to the stars. I've heard many things in my life, screams, engines, songs, but that silence after the blast I will never forget. He placed a hand over his chest, where his heart beat slow and deep. My roar filled the base. I fired. I tore through metal and stone. I didn't care what came next. The memory rose in his voice, a tremble beneath the calm. I flew the Falcon out myself, Rey beside me. The ship shook, but it was not from damage. Looked at Ruka now. She knew. The Falcon knew. Chewbacca touched the cloth-wrapped chain in his satchel again, fingers brushing the fabric gently. Every bolt, every switch, every sound was quieter after Han died. She flew just as fast, but she didn't laugh anymore. His hand dropped slowly back to his lap. We always said the Falcon had a spirit, something of her own. Maybe we were fools. But after that day, I could feel it. He leaned back, spine pressing into the smooth stone. The day the Falcon was silent, I stopped hearing him. A soft breeze moved through the clearing, brushing the Rocha leaves above like ghost fingers. Through fur, Ruka sat still as stone. No words came, none were needed. After a while, Chewbacca spoke again, voice soft and reflective. "Leia, she held me when I returned. We didn't speak, we just held each other." Another pause, long, deep. And when she was gone, I howled again. But this time it was in the forest of Ajan Klos, and no one answered. Chewbacca tilted his head back. Loss is not an enemy you can fight. It is something you carry, like a satchel of stones. You don't drop it, you learn how to walk with the weight. Ruka's breath trembled. He dared to speak. Does it ever stop hurting? Chewbacca looked at him, really looked. And then very gently he shook his head. No, but it changes. He placed a large paw on the moss. In time, the pain becomes part of the song. The forest sighed with him. The stars flickered distant and pale. and Chewbacca closed his eyes once more, not to forget, but to hold the silence with grace. The firelight on Endor. The wind had shifted. It was warmer now, curling gently through the roots and ferns, carrying the scent of old wood and sap. Chewbacca's voice, though still deep and raw, had softened with a kind of peace. Not joy, but something close. A warmth that flickered like firelight. After the war, after the second Death Star fell, we came to Endor. He paused, as though tasting the memory in his mouth. Not for battle, not for strategy, but to rest. Ruka tilted his head. He had heard tales of the final battle, the Ewoks, the rebels, the broken empire. But this part, no one told. The night after the battle, there was a fire. Chewbacca smiled, small but real. Not a weapon, a celebration. He leaned forward slightly, his eyes catching the flicker of remembered flame. The Ewoks lit the fire with oils and song. They beat their drums, danced in circles, threw their tiny hands in the air. They honored us like we were ancient gods. He chuckled just once, a low rolling sound like a distant waterfall over stones. Han tried to sneak away, said he wasn't the dancing type, but Leia pulled him in. Luke watched from the edge, so still, so quiet. Chewbacca paused there, gaze distant. He had seen something none of us could touch. Ruka leaned in, enchanted. The flames cracked high that night. Sparks drifted into the trees. The sky was clear, full of stars, and for the first time in so long, we weren't running. The elder Wookiee's voice had changed again, slower now, like walking across soft grass in the dark. I sat on a log, Han beside me. He passed me a mug of Endorian sap wine. It tasted like tree bark and fire. Chewbacca smiled again. I never liked it, but that night, it was perfect. The forest around them seemed to lean in, listening. Leia danced with Wicket. C-3PO tried to tell the entire story of the war with sound effects and dramatic flair, and R2 shocked him mid-sentence just for fun. He shook his head fondly. We were tired, wounded, some of us broken, but we laughed. We laughed like the galaxy was whole again. Chewbacca ran a large paw over the moss beside him, as though remembering the feel of that forest floor. And then I looked around the fire. I saw all of them, each one, and I thought, this is what I want to remember. He grew still for a moment. Not the battles, not the losses, not the medals. His voice dipped low. But the warmth of that night, the way the fire lit their faces, the sound of laughter against the trees, the soft beat of drums like a heartbeat of peace. He looked to Ruka. Have you ever sat with friends you knew you might never see again and tried to burn every moment into memory? Ruka nodded slowly. Then you know what I mean. Chewbacca inhaled deeply. The leaves above stirred. The night pressed gently in. I never told them, never said the words, but that fire was my farewell. He leaned back again, eyes half-lidded now. I've stood on many worlds, but Endor, that night, is where I began to understand legacy. His voice slow now, like the fading song of an old bird. We are not remembered for the battles we fight, but for the warmth we give when the fires burn low. He closed his eyes. I think that's why the forest sings sometimes. It remembers too. The silence that followed was not empty. It was full of drums and dancing, of sparks in the sky, of Leia's quiet smile, Han's grumbling charm, Luke's watchful calm, the sound of 100 small paws beating on wood, the hum of a story, ending in peace. Chewbacca remained still, his breathing slow, deep, heavy as sleep, and Ruka, though still a child in years, felt something ancient settle into him like a seed, the kind that grows not in soil, but in memory. The last song. The stars above the Shadowlands were now fully awake. They blinked quietly through the branches, silver and unmoving, as if waiting for something. The forest too had stilled, as though every leaf and root knew the end of the tale had come. Chewbacca sat in silence beside Ruka. His breath was deep, slow, old, and then he opened his mouth, not to speak, but to sing. A sound rose from his chest, a low, deep vibration at first, like the hum of the world beneath its surface. Then higher, warmer, rounder, the Wookiee song of the stars. Not words, not melody, but memory carried on breath and tone and heart. It echoed through the trees like wind through hollow wood. Ruka had heard it before, once, faintly, on Life Day, but never like this. This was not a song of joy, nor of mourning. It was a song of passing, of legacy, of return. Chewbacca's voice grew stronger, not in volume but in resonance. It filled the air like mist. The trees seemed to lean in, their roots shifting softly beneath the moss. Fireflies hovered around him, drawn to the sound like stars to a gravity well. Ruka felt it move through him, into his chest, down his arms, into the pads of his fingers. It vibrated inside his bones. Memories were in that song. The pit of Mimban, the first flight of the Falcon, the frozen plains of Hoth, the heat of Endor's firelight, Han's crooked smile, Leia's fierce kindness, Luke's quiet strength, Rey's searching eyes, all of it, woven into a single ancient thread, and Chewbacca sang it into the roots of the world. He sang until his voice began to falter, not in weakness, but in surrender. The final notes lingered in the air, trembling like the last ripple across a pond, and then silence, not empty, but whole. Chewbacca slowly turned to Ruka, eyes heavy, but not tired. "The song must continue," he whispered, "but not through me." He lifted a single paw and gently pressed it to Ruka's chest. "Through you." Ruka's throat tightened. He couldn't speak, but he didn't need to. He reached up and pressed his smaller hand over Chewbacca's, letting the warmth pass between them. A promise, a bond. No chains, only memory. Chewbacca leaned back once more, his body settling into the stone as if it were part of him. His eyes closed and he slept, not a sleep of pain or weariness, but of peace. Ruka sat beside him in silence for a long time, long enough for the stars to shift, long enough for the trees to sway again. Then he stood and he sang, softly at first, unsure. But the notes came, guided by heart, not voice, the tones imperfect but honest. They rose into the air, where they were caught by the canopy above and sent spiraling into the night sky. The last song was not over. It had only changed voices, and in the deep places of Kashyyyk, where roots touch stars and silence holds memory, the forest listened and remembered. Thank you for listening to the Last Song of Kashyyyk. We hope this story brought you peace, warmth, and gentle sleep. If you enjoyed this tale, please consider liking, subscribing, or exploring our Galactic Tales playlist for more bedtime journeys among the stars. May the stars watch over you. always